I have always had a fascination with backcountry aviation. But at the time, I really wasn't into float flying. That is, until my first trip into the Canadian wilderness. We were flying 190 nautical miles into the backcountry on a fly-in fishing trip. The destination? Smooth Rock Lake in the Wabakimi Provincial Park. Float flying. It's a part of backcountry aviation that really thrives in the north. Yeah, sure, you see it in other parts of the world, but it really thrives in Alaska and Canada. Since this single trip, I've been fascinated with float flying, but I have always been disappointed in the fact that no simulator has really ever had realistic water physics. But with Microsoft Flight Simulator, this may finally be changing. So let's dig in and find out more about float physics in Microsoft Flight Simulator. What's going on, guys? Rodnut44. Today we're going to be taking a look at the current progress of water physics in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, personally, I first started flying float planes back in FSX, and that was the box edition of FSX, way before Steam Edition. But I later ended up moving on to Lockheed Martin's P3D, which was pretty much the newest, best thing in the ESP line of simulators, which is Microsoft's Flight Simulator line. Now, during that time, I found that my biggest complaint about water physics between the two simulators was that water drag was just way too high. Aircraft, they would stop way too fast, and you often had to use quite a bit of throttle just to maintain a taxi. Now, for anybody who's ever driven a boat, you probably have a pretty good idea of how water physics have an effect on that vessel. And, well, for those of you who don't, here's an example. Almost immediately after startup, idle power begins pulling the aircraft forward. Now, in prior versions of ESP flight simulators, you will notice that it takes around 1300 RPM just to begin moving on the water. This is way above what would be considered a normal water taxi RPM. Now, let's jump on over to Microsoft Flight Simulator and see how it stacks up. And look at that. At idle power, I'm already moving across the water. Now, jumping into the cockpit here, as you can see, this aircraft idles at about 700 RPM, which is 100 RPM higher than the real 172 in the previous video. And obviously it's a lot lower than the 1300 RPM required to just start moving and prepared. Now, of course, both the prepared 172, the MSFS 172, and the real world 172 demonstrated in the video, all these aircraft are going to have slightly different thrust to weight. So the actual taxi speed is going to be a little different between each of the aircraft. But this demonstration gives you a general idea of the physics and drag at work on the aircraft as it moves across the water. This is just one of the few silent improvements to water physics introduced in Sim Update 6. Water rudders are used for the slow maneuvering speed of an aircraft in water, Typically, they are left retracted at any speed other than a slow taxi. The ability to define water rudders in an aircraft has been available since the first public release of Microsoft Flight Simulator. However, it wasn't until Sim Update 6 that they actually became usable. As you can see in this turn, as the water rudders are lowered, there is a noticeable difference in the turn radius of the aircraft. This, combined with the improvements to water drag, means that power management is now a huge factor when docking your aircraft. You will need to time your shutdown just right to ensure that you don't sail past the dock.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Managing your power in a seaplane or a floatplane can be quite difficult, but there are a few techniques that you can use to help maintain a slow taxi when docking. Switching to a single magneto will give a reduction in RPM, slowing you down a little. A general turn towards the dock can also help to apply more drag, slowing you down even further. This will help most after the engine has been shut down. Combined with wind, this can help you to actually sail your aircraft into a different docking position as well. But most important of all, always remember to dock into the wind, or, although this doesn't specifically apply in Microsoft Flight Simulator right now, upstream. One key element of float flying that's not really available in Microsoft Flight Simulator at the moment is the ability to read the water. In real life, you'd be looking for areas of shallow water, sweepers, rocks, and other obstacles to avoid, not to mention wind direction and how it is flowing across the surface. Of these, MSFS really only simulates to an extent wind speed and direction, as well as in Sim Update 6, now areas of shallow water. However, there is a limitation here, as these areas of shallow water only extend out from the shorelines. Now, much like with boats, the faster you're going, the less of a draft your floats are going to have. So at slow speeds, your aircraft will become stuck in these areas, but if you're on step, you can run right over these areas without issue. Though this is a welcome feature, it does have a downside, in that the shallow area extends a fair distance out from the shoreline. This makes proper beaching or shoreline departures pretty much impossible. So one has to wonder here if the pros are still outweighing the cons. And with that, we come to the final segment of this video. If you've tried out any of the float planes that are available for Microsoft Flight Simulator, you will probably experience one thing that they all have in common: contact point conflicts. Altimeter set. Transponder 1200 set. Lights on. Mixtures full rich. Yoke back, and we push the throttle forward for departure. Relieving a little pressure on the yoke, the aircraft rises a little. First rise. Second rise. And just like that, we're porpoising across the lake. Eventually, we bounce airborne. This conflict between contact points and water in MSFS has been an ongoing battle. As far as I'm concerned, it's the biggest issue still standing in the way of having a very decent float flying simulation. Now, from what I can tell, Sim Update 6 has brought some changes to how contact points interact with water, but at the same time, the improvement here has seemingly been very minimal. So maybe this segment wasn't so much about highlighting an improvement to water physics in the game, but more so on tackling a huge issue that still stands in the way. Overall, even just making a few key improvements, Sim Update 6 has been a huge step forward for float flyers in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And with Sim Update 7 now just about a week out, I really have to wonder if we will be seeing any other improvements that go unannounced. Well, like usual, I guess only time will tell. Thanks for dropping in. If you like this video, skim on across the water and give that like button a good old slap chop before Zobo finally makes it go away. Fingers crossed. Also, leave me a comment below and tell me about some of your favorite float flying destinations. I need to expand my horizons out from my normal stomping grounds a little. But before we go, the numbers are in, guys. With the gradual increase in views over the last month, we have gone from a not subscribed average of 95 to 98%. we may be moving in the wrong direction, but that just means that more of you are finding this channel. So a big thanks to the 24 of you who decided to subscribe in the last month. And as for the rest of you, if you feel oh so inclined, click the subscribe button below and help me get on up to our first goal of 500 subscribers. I don't think we'll make that goal in time for 2022, but you know, maybe prove me wrong. Let's see where this goes. As always guys, I'll see you in the next video. Ruddernut 44, over and out.